Welcome to Criminal Justice Administration. This will be an 8-week course online from June 5th to July 28th. The following PowerPoint that we're going to go through to open up Chapter 1 will be on the Module 1. Y'all make sure you read the syllabus and understand how we're going to operate during the course. We're going to have some discussions, quizzes, a little bit of papers to write here and there, and we're going to try to dig deep into understand why we have to learn about the administrative process in criminal justice. So we're going to study the scope of the justice administration. First, we need to know why. Administration is a science that can be taught, not a talent one must be born with. These are some of the things, just like the military. There's structure and everything that we need to do in law enforcement in order to make sure we do things correctly. In administrative process, that helps us organize ourselves so that we don't violate people's rights and that we're able to collect data, we're able to implement policy, budgets, and things like that. In the process of criminal justice administration, you're going to have the administrators, managers, and supervisors, and we're going to look into those. We're going to have a structure system of command. The administrator is going to be your top person, kind of like your police chief or your sheriff. It says the chief executive, who focuses on the overall organization, looking at the mission, looking at the use of resources, budgeting, relationships with other organizations and groups within their, not only within the jurisdiction, but also parallel or next to other areas. If we had state of Texas, we would look at other states next to us, or even countries like Mexico. If we look at Tom Green County, you might look at Crockett County, or what else is over there? Abilene, or what other, Slacker, different counties like that. So the administrator is going to look at those. A manager is a person that says captains or lieutenants. That's going to be below your administrator and the immediate level of management, responsible for carrying out the policies that are set in the directives of the upper level by the upper level administrators and supervisors. They're going to manage those employees. So you can have these people who are going to be the first line that your officers will talk to. You have your sergeant, and then you're going to bump up from there, and we'll see that here in a second. Supervisor, a person, it says sergeants, typically in the field, who plan, organize, and direct staff in their duties. So one of the things you want to do as we move forward, we're going to put these out there first so that we remember there's a chain of command. Just like this course, you have an issue, you don't understand something, you come to me first. I'm your chain of command. When you don't understand something or you don't know what you need to do, come to me. That's the chain of command. If it's something outside, maybe something that we talk about or something that upsets you, maybe an insult, hopefully I don't do that, or something that you think is off, then if we can't create a solution, then we'll go to my chair of my department, and that'll be the next chain of command. That's how we work. Don't go to other students to find out what you need to do. A lot of times, just like in this chain of command, if officers go from one officer to another but don't go to their sergeant, they might get confused of what's going on. So follow the chain of command. You also don't want to jump the chain of command and go from officer and go up to manager unless there's a problem with the supervisor. And we're going to explore things like that and that how to follow the chain of command. A true system of justice. Each system has components. Okay, our criminal justice system has the police, courts, and corrections. And each is going to have a varying degree of responsibility and discretion for dealing with crime. Relations among and between these components are often characterized by friction, conflict, deficient communication. Even if we look at other elements within our system overall in the United States, 9/11, okay? If you look at the different agencies, federal agencies that dealt with the intelligence and the investigation leading up to 9/11, there was a deficiency in communication. So that trickles all the way down to us. If I don't do a good job communicating to you, you won't understand what to do in the course. If you don't sit there and communicate with me and do work on time or do the discussions or read, well, there's going to be a deficiency in communication. So we all have our part to play. The more that we listen, attend, ask questions, and do what we're asked, the more communication that we'll have, and the less friction, conflict, and deficiencies there will be. But we're going to look at that, talking about trials and tribulations within the justice system overall, looking at shortcomings through different events that's occurred. Criticisms of the justice system or process that is fragmented and with the role conflicts and other problems. This is one of those things that is common, but we need to look at criticisms as constructive if they're done correctly. The media likes to throw us under the bus, but there's been situations that have led the media to have that biased opinion of us, but they don't need to stereotype us. And the same thing goes with anything else that I sit there and talk about in class, the face-to-face classes. These things cross over. So we need to handle our business and make sure that if we do our job, that the criticisms that are correctly done and are legit, that we can take those on as constructive and fix the situations. Our criminal justice system may not be a system at all. It might be better described as a process. Okay, just like the Constitution, when they talk about there's a process that things are supposed to occur within our system. It involves the decisions and actions taken by institutions, offender, the victim, our society, that influence the offender's movement into, through, or out of the justice system. Someone has to commit a crime. The law enforcement is called. They get arrested, they get put into jail. They get handled there, they see a judge, and then they go through the court process. Then they supposedly get rehabilitation. That is a process. And if any time there's shortcomings at any of those one spots, it can mess up the system. At one end of the process are the police, who may view the primary role as getting lawbreakers off the street. At the other end are the correction officers, who may see this role as being primarily custodial in nature. Somewhere in between are the courts that try to ensure a fair application of the law in this case. The criminal justice system planning jargon. You can rock one end of the boat. I didn't read that right. You can't rock one end of the boat. Okay? Because the whole thing is connected. Every action has a reaction, especially in the justice process. Actions and reactions of each component will send ripples throughout the process. If there's a use of force that's not warranted by the cops, it gives the whole system a ripple effect that causes action to be taken throughout the process, all the way even through to lawmakers and our people amongst our societies, and that media that I talked about. Talks about a criminal justice network. The components of the network cooperate and share similar goals. We all should be taking care of making people abide by the law, and the ones that don't need to have some sort of punishment, either financial all the way up to prison time. And then we need to figure out, do they need to go back in society, and can they be productive citizens, depending on the rate or the level of crime that they do. The network operates according to a set of formal procedures, rules to ensure uniform treatment of all persons. Now, as we study this, you're going to find out that that's the goal, but that doesn't occur very often. The outcome of which constitutes justice. Again, that's up to people's interpretation. That's the overall thinking of what we're supposed to do, but we know that that does not always occur equally. Each person accused of a crime receives due process. There's that due process that I alluded to in the Constitution, and is presumed innocent until proven guilty. These days, with the media and social media and the internet, a lot of times we're actually not proven, but we're actually looked at as guilty until proven innocent. And that's kind of sad to say on a lot of accounts. Each person receives a speedy public trial before an impartial jury of his or her peers. It is represented by a competent legal counsel. We'll see how that plays out as we move along. A lot of y'all know that different trials and tribulations, there's the one word again, apparently that's my go-to word, but that always isn't the case. Continuing on about this assumptions, the three components have incompatible goals and continually compete with one another for dollars. Evidence indicates that blacks and whites, males and females, and middle and lower class citizens receive different treatment in the criminal justice network. That's what I'm talking about when I was alluding to a minute ago. Some persons are prosecuted and some are not. Some are involved in plea bargaining, others are not. Some are convicted and sent to prison where others are convicted persons are not. So it's kind of hard to say in one side that everything's supposed to be looked at with the cookie cutter process. But then we know that certain people have different resources. Certain people know certain other people that might help them out. We know that there's flaws amongst the system. Finally, it is argued that the current backlog of cases does not ensure a speedy trial. Vast majority, at least 90% of all arrestees plead guilty prior to trial. We know that in Tom Green County, for a drug charge about a year ago or less, it was taking, my officers that were reporting to me said the Tom Green County Sheriff's Office, they were reporting that it was taking about 2.5 years for a case to go through the whole process. 2.5 years from the time the person was initially arrested. It took 2.5 years for them to figure out what their punishment was going to be. That's not due process. It is argued that the system is neither efficient enough to create a credible fear of punishment, nor fair enough to command respect for its values. And it talks about these researchers state that the criminal justice system is not a system, and it has little to do with justice as the term is ordinarily understood. Another two researchers assert that the criminal justice system is frequently criticized because it is coordinated structure, not really a system. In many ways, this is true. Again, it's kind of case-by-case situation. The fragmentation, police officers have a great discretion over who they arrest and are effectively able to dictate policy as they go about performing their duties. I could go to a traffic stop and find less than 2 ounces. Maybe it's the leftover of a marijuana cigarette, and I might just warn the person and make them throw it out dump it out, throw it away. And another person, depending on what the situation is, I may arrest them. But if I have that discretion in those cases. Most things we have discretion on, except abuse. Family violence. Okay, the law says that we shall arrest. But other than that, we have not due process, but we have discretion over how we handle what we do. Judicial officers also possess great discretionary latitude. Fragmentation also occurs in corrections. With the fragmentation comes polarity in identifying and establishing the primary goals of the system. However, the justice system may still constitute a true system because there's parts that work together, and those parts have an ultimate process that they go through where the person commits a crime, they get arrested. They go to jail, they get arraigned. They go to court, and they find out what the punishment's going to be. Then they may or may not pay a fine and or go to prison. And then they're back in the correction system until they rehabilitate or do their time. Census versus conflict debate. The U.S. system has innumerable lawbreakers. Did I read that right? What does that mean? Innumerable. A lot of people, when you look at some of these different words, you need to understand what they are. Let's see if I can pull this up for us. I'm going to have to go over here and chase it down. It says right here, numerous, okay, immeasurable, countless, okay. So we have tons of people. Basically, what you could say is we have job security. People are always going to be breaking the law. Most are easily handled by the police, do not challenge the legitimacy of the law when arrested and incarcerated, nor challenge the system of government that enacts the laws or agencies that carry out them. 99.9%, that's just my words, of people who break the law do not challenge our system. You know, they just break the law, get in trouble, and move on. They pay their fine. Okay? In the state of nature, people, according to John Locke, were created by God to be free, equal, independent, and when inherit inalienable rights to life, liberty, and property. Each person had the right of self-protection against those who would infringe on these liberties. And if you look at some of it, especially the Founding Fathers, they meant government as well, that they had the right to protect against government. Well, that's a different story. Although most people are good, some will likely prey on their fellows, who in turn would constantly have to be on guard against such people who want what you have. In Locke's view, to avoid their mean streaks, the people who are bad, people join together, forming governments to which they surrender their right of self-protection. In return, they receive governmental protection of their lives, property, and liberty. We agree in the United States that we have a government that's supposed to protect us. So we give up some rights because the government, either local, state, or federal, are supposed to protect us. As with any contract, each side has benefits and considerations. People give up the right to protect themselves and receive protection in return. This is up to great debate. This is where the people say you don't have the right to own a gun because the government protects you. Government, in turn, gives protection and receives loyalty and obedience in return. Loyalty these days, I see it as tax dollars, but that's not for this debate in this class right now. We're looking at administrative issues. Locke's famous theory, of this tactic, consent. Every man doth hereby give his tactic consent, and is as far forth obliged to obedience to the laws of the government. His theory essentially describes an association of landowners. Hobbes argued that all people were essentially irrational and selfish. He believes in the social contract theory. That is very important. Remember that. People are essentially irrational and selfish, but have enough rationality to come together to form governments for self-protection. It goes back to the survival of the fittest. You can't do that because a lot of us would lose that battle. So we get together and we build a government that's supposed to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Rousseau, a conflict theorist, differed from Hobbes and Locke, arguing that man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. He described the conflict between the ruling group and the other groups in society, where Locke described a consensus within the ruling group. The primary difference between consensus and conflict theorists concern their evaluation of the legitimacy of the actions of the ruling groups in contemporary societies. This debate is important because it involves the competing views of humankind towards its ruling group. This is classic political debate of, do we let big government tell everybody what to do, or can man or woman protect themselves? And you have this state versus federal, or individualism versus the bigger group. Who can protect who? Consensus model, the view of criminal justice system, is which it is assumed that all parts of the system work together towards a common goal. Conflict theory, or model, holds that actors within the criminal justice system are self-serving. The pressures for success, promotion, and general accountability, and resulting in fragmented efforts. So one says we do things because we have a group think. We want everybody to have common goals and goods and to be equal. And the other says that, wait a minute, you have a self-serving system and there's pressures for success promotion, and a general accountability. So therefore, it fragments the system and the efforts that we do, and that's why we have what we have, where that's not all equal. These two competing models of the criminal justice process: crime control model, a philosophy that states crime must be repressed, that accused presumed guilty, legal loopholes eliminated, offenders swiftly punished, and the police and the prosecutors given a high degree of discretion. Then you have the due process model, the idea that the accused should be presumed innocent and have their rights protected, while the police must act only in accordance with the Constitution. But neither of these models completely dominate a particular community or control of the U.S. crime policy, because there's always different ways of looking at the same thing. But as long as they go by the law, you can interpret from different angles, and that's why we have two different philosophies of looking at this. Private business and corporations can use a panoply, hopefully I spelled that right, of external rewards to motivate and reward their employees. Okay, these include what? Financial bonuses, different benefits like a private office, keys to the executive washroom, paid trips, company car. Sounds like the government, federal government. Awards, expense accounts, memberships into the country club, and on and on and on. People working in the public sector must acquire their job satisfaction primarily through internal rewards, doing work that is gratifying, to themselves, making them feel good about themselves and what they accomplish. In the past, it says change in the criminal justice agencies typically occurred slowly and incrementally. In other words, it ticks along and change is very slow. Okay? Change is now a constant rather than an exception. If unplanned, programs will often fail and even result in negative consequences in the workplace. Change in the criminal justice should not and typically does not occur accidentally or haphazardly. Justice administrators must know how to plan, implement, and evaluate interventions that address problems in their organization and system while taking into account all other important components. So you can't be irrational and just make changes on a whim. You got to investigate it. You got to figure out the pros and cons. How's it going to hurt the budget? How's it going to hurt what we're doing already? Is crime going to go up or down? Who's going to get hurt? Anytime there's a change in policy or the law, somebody gets damage to them. Maybe not physically, but monetarily or beliefs. Okay? We'll explore that later. Plan change involves problem analysis, setting goals and objectives, program and policy designs, developing an action plan, monitoring and evaluation. Okay? And they'll give you some examples here. Programs and policies about domestic violence, prostitution, drug abuse, gang activity. We also had one locally here in Tom Green County with the Tent City over by McDonald's. We complained about it, but you can't be irrational and just go over and start arresting people. Okay? Now, we might disagree on some of that, but we'll go through that later. But the city had to do some investigating. They had to look at some, change with a problem, and they had to do an analysis. They had to say, okay, where's our legality here? What can we do and what can't we do? Who owns the property? Why are these people there? Okay, so they had to investigate the situation, and they came up with a policy that they had to put a new ordinance in to where people could not camp out down there. And we'll look at that later on and how they came up with that decision, what the decision said, and then what they're doing here on out. It says there's a force field analysis. There will always be barriers and resistance to change, not just in the criminal justice system, but throughout the whole process, no matter what we look at. Such barriers may be physical, social, financial, legal, political, oh yeah, buddy, and technological in nature. One useful technique for identifying sources of resistance and support is called a force field analysis, which involves identifying driving forces, those supporting change, who wants it, who's paying for it, okay, what group is for it, and restraining forces, those resisting the change, who's against it, who's not willing to pay for it, who's getting upset if this goes on. And you analyze these forces and you identify in step one. You analyze them and you say, why are they this, that way, and the other? Why are they taking that position? Identifying alternative strategies for changing each force identified in step one and focusing on reducing forces of resistance. You know, why are you against gun control? Why are you against a curfew? Why are you against kicking out the people in Tent City? And then you sit there and you try to work on understanding why are they against it, and do you need to change your policy, or can you get them to understand or make changes that would make that other group happy? And you try to come together and have compromise and or change enough to where the general population, a consensus, is happy. Okay, well, that's the PowerPoint in my lecture for Chapter 1, Week 1. Make sure that you look through. I'll have things organized into an outline to where you'll know which, in the boxes, you'll see what's required to read, links that you need to click on and watch or read. We're going to have a discussion and a quiz this week, and then we'll walk you along and we'll bounce and keep stepping up and improving and enhancing what we know about public administration inside the criminal justice system. All right, thank you.